Hello, welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Criterion. And in this edition, we'll be taking a look at the 1999 film The Wind Will Carry Us, directed by Abbas Kiarostami, coming to the collection on Blu-ray. Abbas Kiarostami is an Iranian film director already with a number of titles in the Criterion collection. An active filmmaker since 1970, he has been involved in the production of over 40 films, including shorts and documentaries. He achieved critical acclaim with the Coker trilogy, that's 3 films made from 1987 to 1994. A Taste of Cherry and The Wind Will Carry Us. Kiarostami had worked extensively as a screenwriter, film editor, art director and producer, and he had designed credit titles and publicity material. He was also known as a poet, photographer, painter, illustrator and graphic designer, and he was also part of a generation of filmmakers in the Iranian New Wave, a Persian cinema movement that started in the late 1960s and emphasized the use of poetic dialogue and allegorical storytelling dealing with political and philosophical issues. Now, the title The Wind Will Carry Us is a reference to a poem written by the modern Iranian poet Farrokh Faraghi's. In the film, a journalist presenting as a city engineer arrives in a Kurdish village to document the locals' mourning rituals that anticipate the death of an old woman. In Kiarostami's film, the poem is recited in what could be called its centerpiece scene. This scene is the only one that's set indoors, and by our unnamed male protagonist as he attempts to seduce a young girl in a dimly lit grotto while she collects milk from the family cow. Now, the encounter isn't quite as provocative as it might first seem, and indeed Farrokh's words convey much of the sequence's visceral and thematic weight. Preoccupied with notions of transience and temporality, the moon is red and anxious, the clouds await the birth of rain. 1 second and then nothing. The passage is indicative of the film's larger considerations of death and the incremental acclimation of time, as well as the formal and nominal characteristics, making it a cumulative work for its creator, if not cinema itself, at the turn of the millennium. Now, advancing along the horizon towards Sayadare, a remote Kurdish village some 400 miles outside of Tehran, a 3-man film crew arrives in anticipation of the death of an elderly woman, whose ceremonial burial and attendant mourning rituals they hope to turn into a television documentary. However, when she fails to pass away within the first few days, instead showing signs of actual recovery, the men are forced to wait out the inevitable, to the frustration of not only themselves, but also their bosses back home, and indeed the local townsfolk who view these outsiders, who identify themselves as engineers, as nothing more than opportunists. Now, the majority of the film, The Wind Will Carry Us, focuses on the anonymous producer, that's Behzad Durrani, in charge of impending shoot and his day-to-day explorations of the village itself. He's led on most of these tours by a young boy named Farhad Sorabi, who seems more than happy to accompany the stranger, as long as that doesn't interfere with his studies. Now, there's little traditional drama taking place in The Wind Will Carry Us. Instead, we see unassuming moments playing out without much fanfare, humour, and indeed ironies emerging from the routine activities of visitor and the villagers alike. Thus, the slightest hint of tension here, such as the aforementioned scene set in a ghostly enclave, or a late moment in which a labourer falls into a pit, carry an immense sense of gravity. Kiarostami chooses to focus on only a handful of individuals in the village, relegating a majority of his sometimes vital characters to being just off-screen voices. In fact, the most important information in the entire film is almost always approached from discrete angles, if not simply omitted entirely. We never see, for instance, the other two members of the production crew, although we do hear them in conversation throughout. Not even the ailing old woman is seen, or indeed heard, taking on instead a kind of spectral role as if she's already passed away, simultaneously advancing and prolonging the narrative. Kiarostami, in turn, will position his camera in ever-expansive yet highly constricted formulations, moving from extreme long shots of the surrounding landscape to a static, almost structureless tableau of the village architecture itself. And this slyly intricate shot-reverse shot encounters, most of which isolate, of course, the performer in conversation with an unseen partner themselves, often filmed on an entirely different occasion, and usually opposite Kiarostami himself. Now, these repetitive setups and the repeated activities depicted within them enhance the film's parallel function as a bleak comedy, while it's reinforcing the mundane anticipation that fuels such situational irony. Now, after the film premiered at the Venice Film Festival in the fall of 1999, The Wind Will Carry Us was released stateside the following year, and indeed appropriately for a film of such comprehensive thematic and aesthetic value, it has retroactively come to represent a key moment in the evolution of contemporary art house cinema. Not only was this the last film that Kiarostami would actually shoot on 35mm stock, but it also brought to a close a decade of stylistic innovation and refinement. Now, The Wind Will Carry Us was nominated for the Grand Prix of the Belgian Syndicate of Cinema Critics. After its screening took place at the 56th Venice International Film Festival, the film remained unreleased in the United States until 2000, and later it enjoyed a rediscovery among both the public and mainstream critics during the late 2000s, after many critics named it as one of the best films of that decade. Now, it comes to the collection on Blu-ray, and that comes from a 4K restoration source. The overall look of the film is dark, but colours do look significantly more authentic in this restoration, with the heightened blues, greens and yellows of past transfers looking over-sharpened by comparison. The compositions are softer here, but there is visible texture and more balanced contrast throughout, significantly bringing detail to the fore. There are very few digital artifacts, but enough grain is in evidence to reinforce the film's properties. And sound, of course, is a subtle but crucial element of this film as well. And it just has a simple mono track, but that does a wonderful job handling all the incremental and ambient sounds, which pepper the mix. There's really no need for a surround soundtrack here. Dialogue is likewise clear and upfront as well, with no undue noise to note, and there's audible depth to the track and enough separation between the elements to keep things from becoming too cluttered. Now, the film comes to the Criterion collection, as I say, on Blu-ray only, and it comes with the following supplemental features. We have A Week with Kiarostami from 1999, a documentary by Yuji Mohara on the making of the film itself. Interview from 2002 with director Abbas Kiarostami. New video essay presenting Kiarostami's poetry, narrated by Masume Laiji, a long-time translator and creative collaborator of the directors. We have a trailer, and there's a new English subtitle translation. And of course, as always, we have an essay by the poet and novelist Kaveh Akbar. And the cover art is by the regular contributor to Criterion, that is Eric Skillman. Suffused with Kiarostami's love for people, poetry, and the arid beauty of rural Iran, this meditative masterpiece reflects upon the boundaries between intimacy and alienation, tradition and modernity. with the utmost of grace. The film has a running time of 119 minutes and comes in an aspect ratio of 185:1 in Persian and releases on Blu-ray only in the US on Tuesday the 13th of May as Spine 1261, and it also releases in the UK on Monday the 2nd of June, also on Blu-ray. Another worthwhile Kiarostami film to check out is the 1990 film Close Up, which looks at how real life mixes with fiction and deception. It's a fascinating feature. Next time on Let's Talk Criterion, we have two films starring Richard E. Grant, both from Britain, Hard to Get Ahead in Advertising and With Neil and I, coming to the collection on Blu-ray and on 4K UHD. So until then, as always, it's goodbye from me, and above all, good Criterion viewing.